I want to take you down to the old 6 Mile Creek, which is where the Zodiac killer, Frank Morris, and the Anglin brothers tried to knife me around 1962 after they escaped from Alcatraz. Now, it could have been 63 or 64, but first I want to give you a little history. The Anglin brothers and Frank Morris broke out of Alcatraz in 62, and that was in June. So it could have been that very same summer that they were swimming in 6 Mile Creek with me, because the Anglin brothers are from Ruskin, Florida, which is just a few short miles from where we're going to be today. And we are going to visit that area possibly today to do some more filming for you, so there'll be another video on that. I wanted to tell you a little history on the Tampa Police Department. When I was a teenager, I was interested in becoming a police officer in Tampa. So I was meeting with the police officers and taking the tests and that sort of thing. And then during the summer of my 11th and 12th year in high school, I went to Mexico City to study Spanish. I spent the entire summer there, 2 summers in a row, and I went back the 3rd summer on vacation. So the year 70, 71, 72, the summers I spent in Mexico City. That's where I met Frank Morris. I was walking down the street and he spoke to me, and we kind of became friends. I only spoke to him once or twice that first year. And then the second year, things got more in depth, and I was, that's when he tried to attack me a few times, and then afterwards he would say it was a joke, and they were kidding, and but anyway, I want to give you some history of the Tampa Police Department. Our mayor, Dick Greco, who was a very honest mayor back then, appointed this officer to be the chief of police. I don't remember his name right now. He appointed this man to be the chief of police because he was also very honest. And back around that time, there was an officer named Richard Cloud, and they appointed Richard Cloud as the head of the narcotics division. And a friend of mine who was a police officer, his name was W.D. Brown, was moved up into the detectives. I think he was working narcotics with Richard Cloud. To make a long story short, they were fighting the mob, and I kind of think they lost, because they were prosecuting a lot of people that they couldn't prosecute before, because the mob was able to control those situations from within and from without. They couldn't control Richard Cloud or the chief of police or the mayor, Dick Greco. These were honest people. So Richard Cloud ended up getting fired from his position, fired from the police department, because he refused to take a polygraph concerning unfortunately, shortly after that, he was assassinated. And the articles that I have researched on it say that was mob related. Now, I can't prove that, okay? I'm just telling you what I read. And after that, I had met with W.D. Brown a couple of times, and he and a group of officers were planning on resigning from the police department. And that's what happened, including the chief of police resigned. Now, during the summers when I was going to Mexico City, I was coming back and reporting to Officer W.D. Brown about my meetings with this man in Mexico City. And he told me that I was meeting with the Zodiac killer. He asked me questions when I told him it was 3 people and that they had told me about escaping from an island. He was just flabbergasted. He couldn't believe that the same 3 people who had escaped from Alcatraz might possibly be the Zodiac killer. I told him about the Dan Cooper jump. I showed him a picture, which I'm going to show you later as soon as I can get it out of the closet, that the Zodiac signed for me with one of his Z-type symbols. And now I'm going to explain all that to you. And the officer made the report to the FBI, and the FBI said they couldn't do anything because Mexico had a no extradition policy with the U.S. They couldn't go down there to look this guy up. When he saw the symbol on the picture that I showed him, he told me to stay away from this guy, that he was going to kill me. Well, he was right, and I should have listened to him. But unfortunately, the place that I lived in Mexico City, to get to a good restaurant where I could eat, that the food was safe, I had to walk past his house. And I tried going other ways, and he started following me, him and the Anglin brothers. More details on that are in my book, and I'm still looking for an editor for that book. This is the park we're visiting here today, the Veterans Memorial Park on US 301 in Tampa, Florida. This used to be called the Tizawee Trailer Park. It was a place where snowbirds came down to escape the snow, and they spent their winters here. And it lie next to 6 Mile Creek. You can barely see it over there on the other side of the fence, and there's a pipe going across it. But that's where the creek was, but they've dug it out into a giant drainage canal. Here's a little tour into the park. It's another really beautiful park. Florida is full of these parks. I could just spend my time going to the parks here, which I did a lot of that when I lived here. But this is what the Zodiac killer, Frank Morris, and the Anglin brothers like to do. They like to hang around parks and watered areas. But they picked more secluded places. Back in the early 70s, when I used to come here, this was very secluded. None of this was here. Okay? It was just a trailer park, and it wasn't very big. People parked their RVs here. We're going to take a little walk down here. This used to be the trailer park, and it's been made into a Veterans Memorial Park. You can see a helicopter and a tank up there under the tree as we come around the corner. Here we are right in front of the helicopter and the tank. And if you look at that brush row along the back there, back in 1971, in the 60s and 70s when I lived here, there was a little forest there, and then behind the forest was a field, and behind the field was a housing complex that I lived in. It was called Buffalo Estates. Now, to give you an idea of where we're going, there's the helicopter and the tank. Here's the Rear Admiral Leroy Collins Jr. Veteran Museum, which I have yet to go inside of. And that's 6 Mile Creek over there in the distance. Here you can start to see the water out there in the drainage canal. That used to be 6 Mile Creek. As we walk along the sidewalk here down to the south sort of edge of the park, southeast, we'll come to another creek. It was an area where 2 creeks came together. Water out here everywhere because it's been raining every day since I got here. They have a little boat dock here if you want to launch a boat. And we're going down this sidewalk, which I sometimes use for a jogging trail, because there's about 3/4 of a mile run down there. A good workout. Now as we approach the gate, it kind of goes out of the park, but I think the park actually continues along here along the running path. We're going to come to another canal that connects up here, and you'll see it right here. This little creek, which has 30 times more water in it right now than it usually does because of all the rain we've had. And when I was a kid in the 60s and 70s, this little creek had its own wild ecosystem covering it over. And I could walk from my house down to here, which was about maybe a half a mile or 3/4 of a mile, and just be in that wild ecosystem. That's what the Zodiac killer, Frank Morris, and the Anglin brothers liked, was being out in the wild. If they would see someone out here, they would decide that that person was trying to ruin their beautiful outdoors, so their answer to that was to kill them. And they killed at least one boy along here that I can remember. If you look at the water, it appears to be flowing to the left because of the wind. It's actually going to the right. But when I would come along here, this creek, of course, empties into the 6 Mile Creek here, the drainage canal. You may be able to see it. It goes through pipes underneath the road that we're standing on, and it comes out right there. It looks like a spring boiling up, but it's actually water coming out of the pipes. To give you an idea of the size of it, this canal, when I was a kid, and when the Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers hung around here, it was about as big as this creek is now, and had about that much water in it. We would actually jump across this. This was a little tiny creek. We would jump across it and walk on down this way along 6 Mile Creek up to a point where the Anglin brothers and Frank Morris had built a dam. It was very well constructed. They were quite good at it. Frank Morris was a draftsman, so he was able to mastermind things like that. And the Anglin brothers had spent time in Leavenworth breaking rocks, so they were able to move all of those things that they needed to make a small dam. So if you can imagine damming something that size with a really beautiful little dam, just a pile of rocks on each side of the water with a log spillway, and it backed up into a giant, well, not a giant, into a small pond, which was maybe, I want to say, 60 or 80 feet across. The water back then was crystal clear, and kids would go down there to play tag, water tag. The reason they destroyed all this beautiful wilderness and cut this big canal through here was, just like right now, it's raining every day. There's so much water in Tampa that a lot of Tampa would be underwater if it wasn't for this drainage canal, and several other ones that they've built. But this one, I think, may be the biggest one. It really moves a lot of water out of here and out of the Hillsborough River. The Hillsborough River used to back up onto the roads before they widened this. I'm gonna take a little walk up here. I'm thinking that where we used to swim was approximately where those trees are, right up in front of us along this walkway. I do recall that as we were nearing the area where we swam in the creek back then, you would go by some trees that were covered with wild grapevines. And those trees right there are covered with wild grapevines, so I believe we're in that area. And there's a big oak tree up there. I think that's the one that held up the vines back then. You have some new palmettos growing in front of here, but some of those old ones, that one and that one, would have been here back then, most probably. Maybe not, they would have been really small. Here's some more grapevines. We're kind of getting past the grapevines. There's some more in the trees up in front of us. So I'm going to estimate that the dam that they built was right around in this area, somewhere before, probably right here, if not even all the way back to those trees that are on the little walkway path there. Somewhere in here, because well, it could have even been further over here, because you could hear, I recall you could hear the traffic down there on 7th Avenue. You see the bridge going across. That bridge was there back then. You couldn't see it because there was so much brush between here and there, but if you looked really carefully, you could barely see little spots where you could see cars moving by. Little holes in the, little small holes where you could see through the brush, maybe 6 inches across. So that would have put us right around in this area where the Zodiac killer murdered a little boy by stabbing him. And the day after, they tried to stab me. I'm going to put a link on here so that you can see my video about that. I got away from them. I spent my life studying judo, karate, wrestling, and athletics, and I wasn't your average person to try and do something like that to. And my friends and I spent a lot of time practicing knife fighting and handling guns. So let's go on up to the bridge. Just to give you an idea of the distance that the canal, 6 Mile Creek, had to flow to get from that bridge down there, which is 301, down here to 7th Avenue. And I'm breathing heavy because I jogged up here. I'm going to jog over to the bridge and get some more video. On the end of the trail here now, we're all the way over to 7th Avenue. That's the 7th Avenue bridge. And in the back, you can see the train trellis bridge. I wanted you to get a look at both bridges. You see, after the water passes the train trellis bridge, it goes on down, passes another bridge or two, I don't know, and eventually it dumps into the Palm River. Okay? Now, we got to make the long trek back, and I'm going to jog, so I'll meet you over there. Picture of the pipes that let the water come out of the small canal, small creek, into the big one, the 6 Mile Creek. You can see them, water's kind of clear there and everything. I just wanted to get you a shot of that. So that was a nice little jog of about 3/4 of a mile to a mile along what used to be 6 Mile Creek. I'm staying in shape, in case you want to know, just in case I meet any of these guys again. I'll be ready for them.